Karen's day started, as all her days did, with a meticulous inspection, not of her home, which was immaculate to a fault, but of the neighborhood she ruled with an iron fist. The idyllic cul-de-sac of Meadowbrook Estates. As she sipped her herbal tea, her eyes, sharper than any hawk, scanned the manicured lawns for rogue dandelions, unapproved gnome statues, or, heaven forbid, a misplaced recycling bin. Today, however, her focus was on the community pool, a shimmering blue jewel. In the heart of their suburban kingdom, a kingdom she had personally fought to keep pristine and exclusive. The sight that greeted her was, in a word, a travesty. A boy, no older than 15, was doing cannonballs in the deep end. But it wasn't the cannonballs that sent a jolt of righteous fury through Karen. It was the fact that she had never seen him before. He wasn't one of theirs. His laughter, loud and carefree, echoed off the pristine stucco walls of the clubhouse. A jarringly discordant note in Karen's perfectly orchestrated symphony of suburban tranquility. Her phone was in her hand before the second cannonball even had time to ripple. "Hello, Sheriff's Department." "Yes, I'd like to report a trespasser," she said, her voice a low, dangerous hiss. "He's an unknown individual, causing a disturbance at the community pool. He's well, he's just not from here." Officer Miller arrived, a seasoned veteran of countless Karen calls, his face a mask of weary resignation. He found the boy, Marcus, sitting on the edge of the pool, his feet dangling in the water, chatting with a group of other teens. Marcus was a guest of the Miller family, who lived 2 doors down from Karen, and his mother was a good friend of Mrs. Miller. This, of course, was a detail Karen had not bothered to ascertain before dialing 911. "Is there a problem, ma'am, officer?" Miller asked, his tone flat. Karen, flustered but not defeated, launched into a tirade about trespassing, property values, and the sanctity of community rules. The other teens, and even Mrs. Miller, who had come out to see what the commotion was, stared at Karen with a mixture of pity and disbelief. The Bodycam footage, which Officer Miller discreetly activated as soon as he saw Karen, captured it all. Karen's indignant pointing, her increasingly shrill voice, and the quiet dignity of Marcus as he explained that he was a guest. It also captured the final damning words from Karen. "I just don't think he belongs here," she huffed, her eyes narrowing, as she looked at Marcus, a black teenager, and then back at Officer Miller, who was now shaking his head in disgust. "I just think you should know your place." The words hung in the air, a sickening echo of a bygone era. Mrs. Miller, a kind woman who had always tried to see the best in her neighbors, simply took Marcus by the arm and led him away, her silent censure a heavier blow to Karen than any public rebuke. Officer Miller, after a brief, tense exchange, simply packed up his gear and left. A look of profound disappointment etched on his face. Alone at the pool, the laughter and splashes now a distant memory, Karen felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time, shame. But she quickly suppressed it, replacing it with a familiar, comforting indignation. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was just protecting her community. It was the world that was wrong, not her. She walked home, her back ramrod straight, already, plotting her next move. She would not be humiliated. She would not be defeated. She was Karen, and she was going to get her way. The video went viral within hours. Karen calls cops on black teen for swimming. Bodycam footage reveals the truth. The title, plastered across every social media platform, was a scarlet letter for Karen. The comments section was a digital firing squad. Each post a new bullet of condemnation, disgusting, racist, entitled. The words stung, but what truly fueled Karen's rage was the feeling of injustice. She hadn't done anything wrong. She was simply enforcing the rules. The world had twisted her good intentions into something ugly, something she was not. Her husband, a mild-mannered accountant named Richard, looked at the phone in his hand as if it were a ticking bomb. "Karen, you need to see this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He showed her a local news segment where the Miller family, looking weary and pained, spoke about the incident. Mrs. Miller, with tears in her eyes, said, "It's just heartbreaking. Marcus is such a good kid. He was just swimming." This was the final straw. They were making her the villain. They were painting her as a monster. She snatched the phone from Richard's hand. "This is a setup. They're trying to ruin me," she shrieked, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling. She couldn't believe her own neighbors, people she'd shared potlucks and holiday cheer with, would betray her like this. Her fury soon morphed into a chilling resolve. She would not be a victim. She would fight back. She grabbed her laptop and began composing an email, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It was addressed to the entire Meadowbrook Estates HOA board, with a subject line in all caps. Urgent. Violations of community covenants. In the email, she detailed every minor infraction she had observed in the last 6 months. The Miller's lawn gnome, which she had always secretly despised, was now a blatant violation of Section 4.3, unapproved exterior decorations. The overgrown rose bush at the end of the cul-de-sac, which a kind old widow tended with loving care, became a serious breach of Section 5.1, landscaping negligence. She attached a carefully curated photo album of these transgressions, complete with dates and times. Her grand finale, however, was a formal complaint against the Millers. She accused them of harboring a known trespasser and inciting public discord by speaking to the media. She demanded a special board meeting be called immediately to address these critical threats to our community's integrity. Richard watched her, his face a mixture of fear and sorrow. "Karen, please. This is only going to make things worse," he pleaded. But his words were lost in the roar of her righteous indignation. She was a woman on a mission. She would not be silenced. She would not be shamed. She would show them all who the real victim was. And as she hit send, she felt a rush of power. A sense of control she hadn't felt since the video of the pool incident had first gone viral. She was no longer just Karen. She was an avenging angel, and her retribution was just beginning. The special board meeting was a disaster from the moment it began. The Meadowbrook Estates clubhouse, usually a place for cheerful potlucks and children's birthday parties, was now a courtroom, and Karen was both the prosecutor and the defendant. She had walked in with her head held high, a stack of printed emails and photos clutched in her hand like a holy text. The other board members, a group of 5 retirees who had previously focused on things like landscaping budgets and community picnic themes, looked at her with a mixture of fear and confusion. Her presentation was a masterclass in petty grievances. She started with the Miller's lawn gnome, a cheerful little ceramic figure holding a fishing rod. "This gnome," Karen announced, pointing a trembling finger at a blown-up photo, "is a clear and present danger to our property values. It sets a precedent. What's next? Flamingos? Trolls? A whole miniature golf course on the front lawn." The board members exchanged nervous glances. The Millers, sitting in the back, looked utterly defeated. When Karen moved on to the overgrown rosebush, the kind old widow who tended it began to quietly weep. It was a vicious, unrelenting attack, and Karen felt a surge of vindication with every word. She was exposing the rot, the decay, the subtle erosion of the standards she had worked so hard to uphold. But her grand finale, the formal complaint against the Millers, was where her carefully constructed house of cards began to crumble. She accused them of harboring a known trespasser and inciting public discord, her voice rising to a fever pitch. "They are a cancer on our community, and they must be excised," she declared, her eyes burning with fanaticism. It was Richard, her quiet, long-suffering husband, who finally broke the silence. He stood up, his face pale and his hands shaking. "Karen, stop," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. "This is not who we are." Karen stared at him, stunned. This was her ally, her partner. How dare he betray her? "Richard, sit down," she hissed, but he didn't. He looked at the board, at the Millers, and then finally, at his wife. "She's wrong," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "She's doing this because she's embarrassed. Because she was caught on video being being a bad person. This isn't about rules. It's about her pride." The room fell silent. Karen's face went from crimson with rage to a ghostly white. The board president, a kind man named Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. "Karen, we've reviewed your complaints," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "and we've also received a petition from over half the residents asking for your removal from the board. Your actions have caused a great deal of harm to this community. We accept the petition, effective immediately. You are no longer a member of the Meadowbrook Estates HOA board." Karen stood there, a statue of disbelief. The papers she had so proudly clutched slipped from her grasp, fluttering to the floor like dead leaves. Her empire, built on a foundation of rules and righteous indignation, had been dismantled in a single, humiliating moment. She looked around the room, at the faces of her neighbors' faces that now held no pity, only a quiet relief. The silence was deafening, a final, crushing blow. She had fought to be the hero, but in the end, she had only succeeded in becoming the pariah. She turned and walked out of the clubhouse, leaving behind the shattered pieces of her reputation and the man who, for the first time in their marriage, had finally stood up to her. The silence in Karen's home was a new kind of torture. It was thick, heavy, and full of unspoken words. Richard had moved into the guest room. He still came to the dinner table, but he spoke only in clipped sentences about the weather or the mail. The good morning and good night kisses had stopped. The house, once filled with the faint hum of Karen's constant activity, now felt like a mausoleum. She tried to resume her old routine. She woke up at 6 a.m., made her herbal tea, and looked out the window, but the neighborhood had changed. The Miller's lawn gnome, which she had so viciously attacked, was now flanked by 2 new gnomes, a subtle act of rebellion. The old widow's rosebush seemed to be blooming with renewed defiance. When she saw her former neighbors, they would either look away or offer a tight, humorless smile. The casual waves, the friendly chats over the fence, all of it was gone. She was an outcast in her own kingdom. The most painful consequence, however, came in the mail. A letter from the Meadowbrook Estates HOA, but this time, it was addressed to her. It was a formal notification that due to repeated and well-documented violations of community bylaws, her family's access to the community pool and clubhouse facilities had been suspended for 6 months. The justification cited her own email and photos. Ironically enough, the very evidence she had compiled to persecute others was now being used against her. Karen's hands trembled as she read the letter. The pool, the symbol of her power and prestige, was now forbidden to her. She imagined the other residents, splashing and laughing, enjoying the very place she had sought to control, all while she was locked out, a prisoner of her own making. The final crushing blow came from Richard. He came downstairs that evening, a small suitcase in his hand. He stood at the foot of the stairs, looking at her with an expression she couldn't place. It wasn't anger, or even sadness, but a kind of deep, abiding pity. "I can't do this anymore, Karen," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I can't live with a person who sees the world this way, who would rather destroy a community than admit she was wrong." Karen opened her mouth to protest, to argue, to defend herself, but no words came out. The arguments she had rehearsed, the righteous indignation she had so carefully nurtured, all of it seemed hollow and pathetic in the face of his quiet resolve. "Going to stay with my sister for a while," he said, and then, after a long, painful pause, he added, "I don't know when I'll be back." He walked past her, his suitcase bumping softly against the wall. The front door opened and closed, a final, definitive period at the end of their story. Karen was left alone in the quiet house, with the ghosts of her own actions for company. The silence, once a torment, was now a deep, bottomless abyss. She had won every battle, but in the end, she had lost the war, and she had lost everything. She had fought to protect her home, her community, and her husband were all gone, leaving her to face the one person she had never truly seen, herself. The days that followed Richard's departure were a blur of empty rooms and deafening quiet. Karen found herself wandering through her pristine home, touching the dust-free surfaces, a hollow parody of her former self. Her world, once so full of purpose and rules, had shrunk to the four walls of her house. The community she had policed was now a forbidden kingdom, and she, its former queen, was a lonely exile. One afternoon, she found herself in the garage, a space she rarely entered. Tucked away in a forgotten corner was a box labeled Richard. Old photos. With a sigh that felt like it came from the depths of her soul, she opened it. Inside, she found a collection of memories she had long since buried under layers of grievance and control. There were pictures of her and Richard, young and laughing, on a beach vacation, a photo of them building a snowman in their first winter together, his arm wrapped tightly around her, a picture of her, looking genuinely happy, at a neighborhood potluck, holding a baby that wasn't hers. Then, she found a photo of herself, taken years ago. It was a candid shot, a rare moment where her guard was down. She was smiling, a real unforced smile, and she was standing next to a young boy. She squinted, trying to place him, and then she remembered. It was Marcus, the same Marcus from the pool, but a few years younger. He was at a charity fundraiser the Millers had hosted, and he had just shown her a magic trick. She remembered being charmed by his confidence and his bright, easy laugh. The memory hit her like a physical blow. She saw the girl in the picture, a woman she barely recognized, a woman who was open, kind, and capable of genuine joy. The woman she had become, the Karen of the viral video, was a stranger. She was a caricature, a distorted reflection of the person she used to be. The shame she had suppressed at the pool came flooding back, but this time, she didn't fight it. She let it wash over her, a cleansing tide of regret and sorrow. She saw it all with horrifying clarity, the misplaced anger, the obsessive need for control, the casual cruelty she had inflicted in the name of community standards. She wasn't a victim, she was the cause. She had not been protecting her neighborhood. She had been destroying it, one petty rule at a time. For the first time in a long time, Karen cried, not a rage-filled, frustrated cry, but a quiet, heartbroken sob for the woman she had lost and the life she had ruined. She sat on the cold garage floor, the old photos scattered around her like fragments of a broken mirror, and she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that she had to change, but she also knew that the path to redemption would be long and arduous, and she wasn't sure where to even begin. The mystery of who she was now, and who she could become, hung heavy in the air, a question she was finally brave enough to ask herself. The next morning, Karen's first act was to take down the no trespassing sign she had a handyman install on the community pool gate a year ago. She unscrewed it slowly, feeling the satisfying give of the metal as it came loose. The small bureaucratic act felt monumental. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was a quiet admission of defeat, a small olive branch to a community she had alienated. Later that day, she walked over to the Millers' house. She hadn't spoken to them since the board meeting, and her heart was pounding with a mix of fear and dread. They were sitting on their porch swing, a quiet tableau of family life she had once disdained. Marcus was there, too, laughing at something Mrs. Miller had said. The sight was a knife twist of regret. Stopped at the foot of their walkway, a safe distance away. "Mrs. Miller," she said, her voice a reedy whisper. The laughter stopped. They all looked at her, their faces unreadable. Mr. Miller stood up, a protective stance. "Karen, I came to apologize," Karen said, the words a bitter lump in her throat. She looked at Marcus, and the memory of the young boy showing her a magic trick flashed in her mind. I was wrong. About everything. I never should have called the police. I'm so sorry. The words hung in the air, a rare and fragile thing. Mrs. Miller's face softened, just a little. Karen, she said, her voice still cautious. You really hurt us. You hurt Marcus. That kind of thing. It doesn't just go away. I know, Karen said, and she meant it. She wasn't expecting instant forgiveness. She wasn't even sure she deserved it. I needed to say it. I've been a terrible neighbor. She looked at Marcus again, and a terrible person. I'm sorry. Marcus, who had remained silent, now spoke. My mom told me you were really nice. Once, he said, his voice surprisingly gentle. She showed me the picture of us. Karen's eyes widened. She did. Yeah, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. She said you were her friend. I guess people change, though the words were a brutal, honest truth. Karen nodded, tears welling in her eyes. They do, she whispered. I hope they can change. She stood there for another moment, a silent plea hanging in the air, and then she turned and walked away, a small weight lifting from her shoulders. As she reached her front door, she noticed a car parked in front of her house. It was Richard's. Her heart leaped, a flicker of desperate hope. He was standing on her porch, holding a single box. When she got closer, she saw it was his old photo box. He looked at her, his face weary, but his eyes no longer held the cold pity from their last encounter. I found this in the car, he said, holding up the box. I guess I didn't mean to take it. There's a picture of us in there, from our honeymoon. I was thinking about it on the drive over. He wasn't back, not yet, but he was here. He was talking to her. He was giving her a chance. The mystery of their future hung in the air, an unresolved tension that was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Karen knew that she had a long road ahead of her, a road of atonement and hard work. But for the first time in months, she was no longer alone. She was ready to begin.